Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Advancio Talks. I'm your host, Alex Valenzuela, and today we have a captivating discussion centered around risk management expertise and, of course, insurance. Joining us at the focal point of this conversation is Steve Tunstall and Mariel Sainz. Steve Tunstall is a director and owner of Tunstall Associates since 2012, boasts over 11 years of experience in his role. His influence extends from Singapore to Hong Kong and the broader Asian region, where he provides crucial part-time risk management support to clients globally. Steve, we're so happy to finally have you here on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Of course. And on the Advancio side, we have Mariel Sainz, project management, and, well, an insurance expert. Mariel, how are you?
Great. Thanks for having me here. Super excited.
To kick things off, Steve, can you tell the audience a little bit about the beginning of your career in risk management and insurance, and how did that lead to your new role? Well, now Tunstall Associates. Can you explain your involvement in this company?
Sure, no problem. So actually, I started off as an engineer. So I did mechanical electrical engineering first, then I moved on to surveying, then I ended up doing a master's in project management. But all of that was part-time because I was a really lazy student, and that took me about 15 years to get all that done, although it only takes me less than 15 seconds to say it. But I ended up running companies for some big conglomerates here in Asia. I was running Jardine Schindler's the lift and escalator company. So I was their managing director in the Philippines, and then in Singapore here for 3 or 4 years. Then I moved to Hong Kong, set up a risk management consultancy for someone else over there, did that a couple of years. Then I joined Cathay Pacific, and at Cathay I was the head of risk there for the whole airline, but also for lots of subsidiaries and the rest of the group. And that was risk, insurance, legal, compliance, crisis management, and BCP. So a pretty big role, pretty nervous. You never put your hand phone on silent when you've got that sort of job, because you're waiting for the CEO to call you up and say, hey, we got a problem. So that was a interesting job. I did that for about 5 years and then moved back to Singapore about 10 years ago and set up this business. So I've done quite a few different roles in this business. I really use it as a way to keep doing things that I find interesting and exciting. So I work for a number of large conglomerates as an outsourced risk resource, but I also sit on quite a lot of boards of smaller companies, insurance-related subsidiaries. I get quite heavily involved in a few other things that I enjoy as well. So I co-founded a risk management association, and I work on several other not-for-profits, including I'm on the board of Zero Waste Singapore. So the things that I find passionate and interesting, having my own business lets me sort of build a portfolio of the things that I want to get involved in, and hopefully some of them pay me a little money too.
Well, I'm sure it does. I mean, having this global experience, Asian, more than almost 100 countries, could you elaborate on your involvement in the Insurtech sector and how it has impacted your views of the insurance industry? I mean, being abroad all this time, has that affected or have a little bit of a global perspective into the Insurtech industry and how it has been evolving?
Sure. So I sort of got involved at the start when Insurtech as a buzzword first got sort of passed around 2015, 2016. There were I mean, to be honest, let's be really honest about it. It just means that you're providing technology to the insurance industry. So it's like a lot of these buzzwords, it gets a bit of a cachet and then everybody's using it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're changing the world. And I think that's one of the really important things to bear in mind, is that in my experience, I think there's two main categories of insurtechs, and the most successful ones globally so far are the ones who are actually helping traditional insurance companies to do things better, faster, in a more customer-friendly way. It's the old it's the old saying, in the California gold rush, the people who made all the money were the people who sold the spades. So the Insurtechs that are selling the spades are very successful and making a lot of money. And then I think there's a whole other category of Insurtechs which are really looking to transform the industry. And that's what I'd like to do. I mean, the reality is, if you look at insurance at the moment, rich people and rich companies buy insurance, and nobody else does. But actually, the people who really need it are the ones who are at least educated about it and the least to buy it. So I founded a small Insurtech 6 years ago with a couple of co-founders, and we really wanted to change the way small and medium-sized businesses or SMEs buy insurance here in Asia, but it's been really difficult to get that going. So it's still pretty slow. It's still there. It's still pottering away, but it's not been hugely successful. We're not going to be on one of these Shark Tank shows anytime soon. We just keep plodding on, yeah. But I'm also getting involved in some other technology plays that are again around financial inclusion, because I find that's the area that I really want to focus on. It's the people who need insurance, who need bank accounts. They're the ones that I'd like to fix the problem for, not the people living in the first world who already are, whether they fill in a piece of paper to get their insurance or whether they do it on a website. Actually, it's immaterial. It's not going to move the needle much. But for those people who've never had the chance to access insurance and don't realize the protections that it can bring, particularly for their property and their loved ones, I think those are the people that I'd like to see the Insurtech industry really transforming. And speaking here in Asia, that's still a long way to go.
Well, I mean, I do agree. I mean, people need insurance and need to start protecting their assets. So most vulnerable people, the assets that are more valuable to them, and I think for every human, it's health and it's their home.
I love what you're saying, Steve, because like you mentioned, like it's such a very like normal thing for people like in higher ranks, like insurance is so common. It's like you don't even think about it, but people, like small companies or even like smaller groups, they're not even familiarized with that. They don't know like the pros and the cons. So I love that you're providing them like these options and just saying like, hey, like we hear you, we see you, and that we can also give you like solutions to what could be, like an issue down the line. We can have you protected. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the countries, I mean, I've been doing stuff in quite a few countries across ASEAN in particular. One of the countries, Malaysia, I mean, I actually find a lot of support from the regulators, but there's much less support from the financial community, from the venture capitalists and guys like that, because quite frankly, they're looking for a 20 times exit in 2 years, etc., etc. And financial inclusion is not going to give you that, because it's you're really focusing on small businesses. And when certainly my business was before, although this new one I'm looking at is probably individuals. But I was talking to one of the regulators in Malaysia, and they were saying, 97% of small businesses have zero insurance in Malaysia. And that means If it's like a little mom and pop shop or whatever, they just don't really, it's all hand to mouth. They're just sort of trying to get through the day, trying to support their family. But of course, if their stall burns down, or the mum or the dad who's the chef falls ill, then their whole family just goes hungry because there's no backup plan. And that's the sort of tragedy that I think the insurance industry is ideal for, trying to sort of match up against that and try and help that. It doesn't have to be a massive policy, but any small thing you could do with a small business like that, I think it's a real good, and I want to be involved in things that are good, not just things that are greedy.
It's so refreshing to hear that. I love that. Yeah. No, like you said, like those like those little actions, those little things are the things that keep the world going, you know. And you might say like, hey, I'm not changing the world, but I believe that, you know, like little actions, they do change the world little by little.
So, Steve, I wanted to ask, how do you see technology shaping the future of risk management?
Yeah, so I think overall, it depends which part of risk management you mean. So the stuff we've just been talking about, financial inclusion and things like that, I think technology can make a massive change. And I've lived in Asia over 25 years now, and so Asia is my home. I'm Singaporean. I've taken the local passport, but I've also done a lot of work in China, and in the time that I've been in China, I've seen them almost the entire eradication of poverty for around 800 million people. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And at the heart of that is technology. Unless you go to China and you see what's happening in some of these cities, and I've only been to a few cities, but there are literally hundreds and hundreds of cities in China with over 1 million people. And all these people are now middle class, more or less, by Asian standards. And a lot of the reason for that change is technology. I think we've been less successful in most of the rest of Asia, but it's on the same sort of journey. And I think this is how financial inclusion will actually get to the majority of these people, is through the application and use of technology. So I'm still very excited about that. I think there's a huge amount of work to be done, not only in Asia, but right across the Americas, Africa, and elsewhere. But obviously I'm here, I'm focused here, and I've got the business contacts here. So I'm trying to solve some of these problems first.
And with both of you guys' track records in Insurtech or delving into the industry, can both of you guys speak on how tech partnerships with developers in this industry have helped with your job?
Yeah, well, I think that it's actually like super, super interesting because like you were saying, Steve, right? Like there's also like so many different like faces, if we want to call it, within like the insurance industry, and there's like so many like buzzwords and so many like a niche of every part of the insurance industry. So I think that partnering with not just skilled development teams, you know, whether that's a QA, a developer, even a scrum master or a project manager, but someone that's not only skilled on the technical side, but also on that very niche part, helps us not only just focus on the, you know, on like the usual blockers that will be on that like learning curve, right? So it really helps them just like really get into like the nitty gritty of just like actually solving the issue, whether that's like creating something from scratch or making something that or customizing something that they've noticed, like, hey, I see that in this very particular area we usually see this sort of issue, we see this sort of even like behaviors that the user, or whether we're calling it you know, like the user from the insurance company or the actual person buying that insurance, saying like, hey, maybe just changing this button or maybe just doing this will help through that workflow and make it so much easier. So instead the person of just saying like, hey, I like this, but the app or whatever we're using, it's too bulky. All those little things, I think that it's what basically makes those breakthroughs, because they're not focusing and learning about the insurance industry because they already know it. They're so into it that they're very familiarized with that, and that leaves so much room for innovation, and that leaves so much room to use those new tools that we are seeing, you know, like pop up right now. So yeah, I think that's that's my take on that.
Maria, you and I went to ITC Connect Vegas, and I think that we got to see a little bit of a glimpse there that there were a lot of Insurtech companies that were very niche, that solved very specific issues within the policy service claims. So we got to see that, and we got to see real smart people, real talented developers familiarized with the industry, and whether they were helping underwriting or rating or whatever, they were really familiar with the industry. And I mean, that definitely helps have a high quality product.
Yes. Yeah, and what I also think, right, is that from what I saw, what you were mentioning, like from ITC, that conference, what was very interesting was that most insurance companies, they have like very specific problems. Like the issue to identify their blocker or what they needed to solve was not the issue at all. They already knew. But what they wanted was someone to help them, like guide them or coach them through that, just like making sure that what they're thinking is actually on the right path by using the right tools. So basically that they're not, like making such a big deal or making something so big that's not necessarily doesn't need to be that big when there's already something built like that. So I think that's what those partnerships also provide and have like so much like richness to it, that it's just like there's so many knowledge coming from everywhere that in the end you get so much to build or to innovate and to just like do a brainstorming session.
I'm pretty jealous actually, because I went to the first ITC Vegas and ran a panel there for Jay and Caribou, but I haven't been back since. That was in 2017, the first one. So with COVID and everything, I just and it's a long way to go from Singapore. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to get there. So I've got to get back though. I've got to try that again. I speak at a lot of the Asian conferences. The biggest one in Asia is in December. That's what's that one called? I forget. Insurtech Insights, I think it's called. That's gonna have about 3,000 people in Hong Kong in early December. So I'll be speaking at that one. But yeah, I want to get back to ITC Vegas. I mean, Mario, some of the things you mentioned there, it's absolutely correct. I think there are still within the insurance companies themselves some really old-fashioned processes and slow processes, and I think the big thing that the technology brings is just how to streamline that, how to thin that down, how to make it easy for the customer, because at the end of the day, nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, yay, I'm going to buy insurance today. You've got to really work out how you make it as easy as possible, a simple and straightforward process that people feel confident that it's gonna do what it says. A lot of the time when you get very clunky technology, people are like thinking, well, if it's this clunky when I'm buying it, what's it going to be like when I have a claim? So there's always that, you need to get that sense of confidence and trust from the customer. Probably more important with insurance than anything else is that the customer needs to be confident and comfortable that you're going to do what you say and you're going to stick to your promises. So if your tech's terrible, a lot of people go, do you know what? Maybe next year. Yeah.
So I'm now curious, Steve. What is the biggest technology advancement you have seen in insurance?
Biggest and most successful one, which you may never heard of, is a company called Zhong'an out of China. Zhong'an provides insurance for, amongst other things, online trading solutions. So they do everything on the back end for insurance for Alibaba, amongst others. They're partly owned by, I think, Alibaba, unless it's changed, PICC and a few of the other, maybe Ping An actually, the big China insurers. But they sell literally billions of insurance policies. It's like anything you can imagine, they just blow everybody else out of the water. And their transaction speed is insane. They do 50,000 transactions a minute or something. It's insane. And it's seamless, and in the majority of cases from the tech I've seen, it's almost invisible. So they're doing mostly embedded insurance. It's hidden in the back of transactions, and the customer never ever really engages with it or sees it. And that, for me, that's the perfect technology solution, where you don't get distracted in the buying process by something that's essentially peripheral to what you're trying to do. So for those of you Googling them, it's ZHONG and then AN, Zhong'an. So very, very successful, but very much a understated back-end provider, but probably the world's most successful Insurtech by a long mile.
I can, what you mentioned, Steve, though, I can already kind of like imagine, like not just the word of like the development team, you know, like on the back end that you mentioned, but like from the QA team, like the stress testing that they must have done to make sure that they can support, you know, like that many number of users without the page crashing down. Because what you mentioned, right, like it's already like a hard task. You're like, you don't even want to do that, like go in to buy insurance. But if you're in the process and then something goes wrong, it's just like, I'll leave it for another day. So I'm sure that was also something like very critical. I can already imagine like the work from the QA team. And that must have been like, really impressive.
Yeah, well, I'm not connected directly with the company, so some of my facts are going to be out of date and wrong. But if anything, they're even bigger and even faster than they were when I was seeing stuff a couple of years back. But no, you're absolutely right. It's got to be smooth. It's got to be slick. I mean, when you buy insurance, there's no new car smell. You don't go, oh, wow, that's amazing, I'm very happy. You just want it to be simple, straightforward, and work. That's it.
So climate change is an increasingly present issue. I was wondering, Steve, do you believe the industry can adapt to the changes and the role of innovation in addressing these challenges?
Yeah, well, climate change and sustainability is something I've had a passionate view for a long time. So, but it wasn't, sort of described in that manner in the past. I mean, 40 years ago, I joined what was called then the World Wildlife Fund, and it's now the World Wildlife Fund for Nature. So supporting those sorts of environmental issues and things has always been something I'm quite passionate about. And one of the things I love about insurance, and I do quite a bit in this space, is not only on the technology side, but I'm also quite heavily involved in protections around natural catastrophes. And you see a lot of the issues across the planet. I was just watching something from the Weather Channel, and literally now in the US, there is a $1 billion loss on a weather-related event once every 3 weeks this year. It's gone insane. So climate change is a thing. It's affected the other stat on that show, which is just came out on the Weather Channel yesterday. I was looking at the mini video. Every single county in the USA has now been affected by a natural catastrophe disaster of some sort or other. So this isn't something that just sits in, remote, strange, developing world places. This affects all of us all the time. So some of the things that I've been involved in. So the way the industry sort of works, you've got insurance for natural catastrophes here, and then you have the reinsurance behind it. And then on top of that, they're building these days something called insurance-linked securities. And that's where you tap into the Dow Jones, the New York Stock Exchange, and you can sell the potential of a natural catastrophe risk to investors. So it's bundled together and sold to investors, and investors quite like it because it's not correlated to the stock market. So you can be pretty certain you're not going to have a hurricane on the same day that you're going to have a stock market loss because of an economic downturn. These things are just not correlated, so it's quite appealing. So these ILSs, I've been involved in quite a few now, and they normally work on the basis of something like if there's a named windstorm and it crosses the Gulf of Mexico coast for Louisiana, then it will pay out a certain amount of money. So they can be parametric, they can be indemnity, but they're different styles. And they're quite good ways for the insurance industry to remain relevant and to remain supportive as we go through the changes that climate change is going to bring. And I think this is an evolving area. We're going to see a lot more issues with this in the next few years. I mean, this year already has been, in fact, I think the last 3 or 4 years have been the worst years ever for natural catastrophes. And this is unfortunately and sadly only going to get worse.
I mean, risk management, it's also a way where businesses can somehow protect themselves and or navigate risk and opportunities. Do you have like a case study that you can share with us in your experience and trajectory?
The most important thing about risk management for a CEO is trying to work out, is my strategy aligned with what the biggest things are that might make my company go bust? So that's the key thing about risk management in a big organization, and that's where I normally do it, is you're trying to filter up to the top of the organization. What are the things that are really going to potentially make the company go pop? And if you know what they are and you can get your head around how they're emerging over the next 3 or 5 years, then as you design the strategy for your investment for your company, you can take those on board as part of the process. So I'll give you a simple example of how that hasn't been done in some cases, but is connected with natural catastrophes. So in 2011, 2012, around that time, there was a huge series of floods in Thailand around Bangkok. And it turned out that something like 70 or 80% of the world's motor supply chain was concentrated in factories in that area. And of course, a lot of these factories got flooded, a lot of them got shut down. So a lot of car supplies around the world were affected because they were locked in to this particular supply chain weakness. And that's, everyone was saying, we should think about this. We should make sure that we don't get stuck in this before. But of course, then in COVID, the same thing happened again, but for different reasons. So COVID obviously meant that a lot of supply chains were fractured as well. And a lot of risk managers are saying since COVID, and coupled with the changes in geopolitics, well, we need to have shorter supply chains. We need to have more duplication in our supply chains. So when CEOs are taking strategic decisions, this becomes a really important part of that process. And I think looking forward, if you want an example looking forward, we can all read about the stress that's coming out in the silicon chip industry at the moment. The US is putting a bit of a sanctions check on China. China can't get the chips that it wants. And globally, we're seeing stress on chips. There's not enough chip availability. And I think from what I've seen, that's really going to intensify in the next 12 to 24 months. There's going to be real shortages of chips. And then the one on the back of that, and I've seen this for a while, but it's interesting, Elon Musk has been talking about this as well. There's going to be a real crunch on electrical equipment. So transformers in particular, we're going to run out of transformers.
Wow.
And then in large parts of the world, we're running out of electricity. A huge amount of the infrastructure for electrical supply, wherever you are on the planet, is really quite old. And it's very difficult to change it quickly, but the demands for electricity are going through the roof all over the world because people are moving away from, moving to electric cars and other things. That means there's a huge increasing demand for electricity, and the infrastructure is quite elderly in most countries and is not going to be able to respond. So they're going to be back to a situation where many developed countries who thought brownouts and blackouts were unusual, they're going to be facing a lot more of that in the future.
I just can't help myself. I'm just like, every time like Steve gives insights, I'm like, wow. I mean, what such a projection. And I think that's all about risk management, right? It's having a projection of the future and how to take care of your people inside of that projection.
Yeah, so this is I enjoy doing this stuff. So I read a lot and I enjoy I enjoy watching people like Elon Musk. So he's just so bright, and his insights are always spot on. I mean, he's been talking about the dangers of AI for a decade, and now you can see people starting to go, oh yeah, maybe it is a problem. But he's like 10 years he's been saying, you know what, 80% it's all going to be good and fine, but 20% maybe not so much.
Inside of Insurtech, how are you seeing this new, well, not so new, I mean, AI has been around for like, 5 years, and recently been kind of mainstream, but I do see a lot of Insurtech companies implementing low-code, no-code, AI, blockchain. I was just wondering, Mariel, how do you see from the tech side this revolution side of the insurance industry?
Well, I mean, I think that's a really good question, because what I was actually like recently reading, like you mentioned, Steve, like there's always, you know, like pros and cons to technology, but I think that right now what AI can provide for the insurance world is you know, easing through the processes that are usually, you know, like very heavy, very rough, but at the same time, I think that reflection that you just made about what we can see up ahead, that hey, there might be, you know, like certain things that that we're already seeing kind of like into our day-to-day, just kind of like use them as, okay, it's a really great tool, but at the same time there's also like so much good thing that we can do from what we already know, like from this insight that we have from working within the industry. So I think that's something that's invaluable. I mean, something that years and years of experience that, for example, you, Steve, within the industry, you've already got this eye and you've got like this projection into like what might be coming up within 12, 24 months ahead. Like you mentioned, Elon Musk, he also has like this insight, and I think that's something that's like basically like the balance that I think that could be like super helpful. It's just like that balance of that knowledge with those new technologies.
So sadly, this is the last part of the Tech Talk. I just wanted to thank both Steve and Mariel for being here and giving us their time and their insights. Steve, do you have any concluding statements that you want to share with us?
No, I think it's been really fun. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just really want to take, I mean, I've got a lot of experience. I've been doing this stuff for a lot of years, but I also see there's a lot of people around the world who don't have the benefits of financial services. They don't have the benefit of insurance, and that now's my passion, to try and sort of take those people and bring them into the light a little bit by having good access to financial services. So anything I can do now to sort of move that needle a little bit, that's where I see the future for me.
That's awesome, Steve. Where they can, in case they're watching this video, where they can contact you.
Oh, easy to contact me. I'm on, I'll give you the email is steve.tunstall@gmail.com. That's always the easy one. But if you Google me anyway, I pretty well come up on everything with images, videos, whatever. You'll find me there pretty easily. I've got over 100,000 contacts on social media and 1 million views on TikTok now as well. So I'm pretty well everywhere if you look for my name.
Thank you very much, Steve. And Mariel, do you have any different topics that you want to discuss or something to add into the topics?
I mean, I think I'm all set. I mean, I just want to thank you, Steve. I mean, I think this talk was amazing. It was, and like I mentioned, it was very refreshing to see this view within the insurance industry, and that, you know, like that your passion for this is not just, like you mentioned, like about greed, but it's also like making sure that everyone has access to it. So I think that's amazing.
Thank you both, and thank you for joining us today at another episode of Advancio Talks. Remember to share, like, subscribe, and to follow us into our all social media platforms, where we'll share parts of little snippets of this video. We also we also share innovations and thought-provoking discussions in the world of technology and, of course, insurance. This is Alex Valenzuela, your host for today on Advancio Talks, and we look forward to seeing you in our next episode. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.